Welcome back to the Stani Army YouTube channel. We've got a special show this evening. We are looking ahead to the Pakistan West Indies Test Series that starts on Thursday afternoon. We've got a really special guest joining us this evening. We've got Santoki from the excellent Caribbean cricket podcast to give a West Indian insight. Santoki, evening. Welcome to the show.
Hey guys, thank you so much for having me on. I'm looking forward to a good contest in the Test arena. I know you guys were saved by the rain in the T20 series, but hopefully we get a good battle in the Test.
Well, I was going to say it was the T20 is obviously the whitewash that we saw in the T20. We'll see if there's a repeat in this series to come. And obviously we've got Hamza, long-time Stani Army member. Welcome back, Hamza. Good to see you.
Thanks. Hi, everyone.
All right, so we've got the Test series. We've had the T20s. There were going to be 5, then there were going to be 4, and in the end we got 1, which, as we say, Pakistan managed to kind of squeeze home in and take the series 1-0. We're now on to the Test matches. They start, as we said, on Thursday, 4 o'clock UK time. We're in Jamaica for both games, so hopefully get an insight from Santoki on kind of conditions and some kind of weather report. I think might be nice as well, based on what happened in the limited overs series. So what we're going to do today, guys, is go through the squads, have a think about team combinations on both sides, give the odd prediction here and there, and then we'll have a chat with Santoki as well about the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, the work that these guys are doing, and maybe some memories as well of Pakistan West Indies games in the past. So Santoki, we'll come to you first. I'm going to bring up some slightly skewed statistics to kind of fit the narrative. So this is the West Indies' recent home form. It doesn't take into account a really quite remarkable win in Bangladesh a few months ago. But looking at the West Indies' home form over the past couple of years, a couple of defeats to India and South Africa, haven't won a Test match in those 2 years. What kind of shape do they come into this series in?
I think it's fair to say we're low on confidence at the moment. Obviously, you mentioned the Bangladesh away series, which we saw some new players be integrated into the side. The Sri Lanka series in Antigua was a very flat pitch, very docile, didn't offer much for the bowlers, and we managed to carve out a draw against Sri Lanka. But the South Africa series was a complete decimation. The batsmen couldn't handle the pace of Ngidi, Rabada, or Kia. And I think it's reflective in the fact that our top scorer, Jermaine Blackwood, only averaged 22 across the series, and he was our standout batsman. So it's a very brittle batting lineup. As always with West Indies historically, we've got a strong pace unit who could cause trouble. But as Phil Simmons reiterated yesterday in the press conference, Pakistan definitely head into this series as favourites.
Yeah, I think Hamza, as Pakistan fans, we probably share that view. It's not often that we might go into an away series in the Caribbean. Bearing in mind we've only ever won 1 series there. It's not often that we go in as favourites. But would you kind of echo that? Do you make us favourites? Do you feel confident? It's only a 2-test series, so you can't allow for too much to go wrong.
Yeah, the thing about the Pakistan Test team, it's a much more settled team than the white ball one. The white ball teams, whether it's ODIs, especially ODIs, is much weaker. The 2020 can be a bit of a mixed bag, but generally okay. The Test team's actually pretty solid, and you can generally pick up around 9 players. There's probably about 2 spots up for grabs, and the form's not too bad. Obviously, we lost to New Zealand, but this is pretty much the best New Zealand team in history. Lost 2-0 out there. The second Test, we could have drawn it. Some heroics from Fawad, and then beat South Africa and beat the Zimbabweans, and now here. And last time we came here, I think we won the series as well with sort of that Yasser wicket right at the end, and Ian Bishop's "Why did he do that? Why did he do that?" comment, which is totally famous amongst Pakistani cricketers now. So yeah, I think we're slight favourites. Well, maybe a little bit more than the slight favourites. I'd be surprised and disappointed if we didn't at least win it 1-0, because I've seen a fair amount of West Indian cricket over the last couple of years. I really like watching the white ball team. The red ball team, as Santoki said, the batting's quite brittle right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And certainly we're going to kind of dive into the West Indies team, and I guess from a Pakistan point of view, look at weaknesses that we can maybe exploit. But first things first. We've obviously got to get the elephant in the room addressed. It's the weather. So as we said, we're in Jamaica, starting on Thursday. Santoki, although you are much like us, very much based in the UK, what have you heard about the weather? What kind of forecast are we looking at? And also, just before you answer, guys, do get your comments in. I know there's a few comments coming in. We're going to try and get to as many of them as we can, answer as many questions as we can. And we'll start with the weather, Santoki.
Yeah, well, I think the bad news is late July, August is monsoon weather across the Caribbean. So we saw it in the T20 series. Barbados was rain, Guyana was rain. Jamaica, we're expecting a similar story. It's scattered showers across the days. Hopefully we can get a game in, but it does look like there will be days dominated by rain. Realistically, this has all been because traditionally in the West Indies, you'd play your test matches April, May, June. Because of the IPL coming in and kind of taking that window, games have been pushed later and it's come into the Caribbean monsoon season. So unfortunately, I think both tests will be affected by rain. But as I said, hopefully it's West Indies, Pakistan. We could get a result for one of the sides within 2 to 3 days. So hopefully we do get a result for one of us.
Yeah, I was going to say that's probably the benefit of a brittle batting lineup on both sides, really, is that it won't take long maybe for 20 wickets to fall on either side. Halkistan wants some Jamaican sun. Unfortunately, we might not get a huge amount of that, but we shall see. We may not need that much of it for a result. Shazeb, thanks for joining in. Shazeb's got a question as well. He wants to ask Santoki, any new guys in the West Indies Test 11? So before we just get to that question, salams to Umar Mirza and Shoaib as well for joining us. In terms of the West Indies 11, we're just going to pull up. This is the 11 from the most recent game against South Africa that we're just going to pull up now. Looking at that 11 with kind of the batsmen that are there, it feels like you're trying to fit 7 batsmen, so that those 6 kind of into six spots. Because there's another opener as well that can play, I think, isn't there?
Yeah, so I think the one change we'll see is in the first test of that South Africa series, Nkrumah Bonner, who he's played a few tests. He averages 55. He's been relatively consistent, getting half centuries this year. He'll come into the side. I expect Kieran Powell not to play. So we'll see Craig Brathwaite and Shai Hope opening. Shai Hope, he was left out from the side for the best part of a year. He's come back in now as opener. He averaged 18 in the last series against South Africa. He hasn't done enough for me to. I know a lot of people refer to his twin centuries in Headingley, which were 4 years ago now. Other than that, he hasn't hit a century in Test cricket. I'm not expecting much from him opening, but what I was talking about before, at the moment, there's no domestic cricket in West Indies. So there's no one who can sort of raise their hand and make a claim to get into this side. So we're stuck with the same pool of players. So I don't have much confidence in Hope opening, but I think Bonner will be the standout batsman for West Indies. Very tricky to get out them. He's 32 years old and he's only made his West Indies debut this year. So he's making the most of his chance because he knows he's come late into it and he's worked hard for it. So Nkrumah Bonner is going to be the threat. And Roston Chase, who you guys remember from the last series a few years ago we played against you guys, he can play spin very well. He's a very capable batsman. So I think Bonner and Chase will be the 2 batsmen to watch out for in that top 6 lineup.
Yeah, Hamza, looking at that from a Pakistan point of view, looking at just maybe the top 6 or 7, first of all, certainly Kyle Mayers, for me, stands out just from the heroics in Bangladesh and the way in which he came in. I think was it 9 on a double 100, wasn't it, in that ridiculous chase at the end of that game. When you look at that batting lineup, Hamza, anything that particularly kind of worries you?
Yeah, the thing is, I've always liked 2 West Indian batsmen. Hope, because he's a very classy batsman. I know his Test career has been sort of up and down, but he actually looks very classy every time I see him bat. And disappointed that is Darren Bravo injured? He's got injured, hasn't he?
So Darren Bravo's had a stop-start career for the past 3-4 years, but he's been left out because of bubble fatigue. He requested it, so yeah, he won't be playing.
Yeah, I was looking forward to seeing Bravo and Shai Hope bat together because I've always been Bravo's had his problems with the board, hasn't he, over the years? Because he sort of came on the scene, related to Brian Lara. He's got like a similar technique, and he's actually really nice to watch. He's got sort of very elegant. He's a very elegant batsman, and I sort of look at the West Indies batsmen and you think, Hope and Bravo, you could build a Test batting lineup around that. I think personally, I think Hope bats too high up the order in Test cricket. I think he needs to sort of drop down a bit. I see him nicking off too much. So I reckon I was hoping to see sort of like Bravo at 4 and Hope at 5, something like that. Myers, he looks very dangerous, but when I watched him against South Africa, he'd sort of make starts and he'd get out to like a flashy shot outside the off stump. So I think but you'd rather a guy not be good with his shot selection rather than have an obvious technical fault. When I was watching him, I was quite surprised. I didn't really see an obvious technical fault. I don't know what Santoki thinks about Myers, but I didn't see an obvious fault. It was more shot selection and patience, but he showed a lot of that in the West Indies against the Bangladeshis. But obviously, it's a different kind of cricket that you play out there with the spinners compared to when you've got sort of Ngidi or Hassan Ali and Afridi roaring in and sort of bowling big outswingers at you. So I think Myers will be interesting to see if he comes off. Again, I'd see interesting to see what Santoki thinks about. Does he actually have a good technique, or do I just sort of watch him on a good day where he was just playing sort of bad shots, but he looked good? Hope, I think he needs to back down the order. What do you think about Hope? Do you think he'd be better at 5 or 6? I just think he needs to get away from the new ball.
Yeah, I think they should move him down, but fundamentally, I think red ball cricket, he needs to go back to the domestic. Once we have domestic cricket, play a season for Barbados and get used to it again, because coming into international cricket without any red ball practice, you're just setting yourself up to fail. And we've seen him prosper in white ball cricket. I think he should focus on that for the time being. So I would completely remove him from the test team until he works his way back in through red ball games in the domestic season. And speaking about Mayers, it's funny enough, we interviewed him on the Caribbean Cricket Podcast only 2 days ago. It's coming out next week.
Okay.
Yeah, and he is a classy batsman, but he said the problem for him is he's naturally an aggressive player. He's used to white ball cricket. So for him, the challenge which he's working with the coaches is trying to balance that white ball aggression, which he can bring in. We've seen Quinton de Kock, for instance, bring that into Test cricket, David Warner, but try and balance that with some consistency. And he's working on his foot techniques to try and render that. But he's new to international cricket. It's something he will learn as series go on and on. But I agree with you. I think Mayers can be a threat if he pulls it off. But we've seen him as well. He does play risky shots, so he could either go out for a duck or he could score a brilliant century. You never know what he's going to do.
I mean, looking at that lineup, it did seem kind of almost set up for a kind of a counter attack. You could see in the series at some point West Indies being 60-70 for 4, and the likes of Mayers and Blackwood and Holder getting them up to 270, 280. So I guess like Pakistan in the past kind of year or so, where we've had a very brittle top order. Especially in New Zealand, we were saved a lot by Fahim, Rizwan, Fawad Alam coming in the lower middle order. It seems like these could be two batting sides that rely on their lower middle order to get them over the line. Question from Umar about the West Indies batsmen. Just moving on from that, I guess there probably aren't many averages over 35. I don't know about Mayers at this stage. Probably quite a small sample size, and a double 100 not out probably helps the old average there. But I guess not many of them are averaging. We don't need a precise answer, but I suspect not many there, Santoki.
No, I think Craig Brathwaite, of the regular Nkrumah Bonner, he averages 55. That's kind of like, it's not a reflective sample size because he has only played a handful of tests. Similar with Carl Mayers. I think Carl Mayers averages 47, but that's boosted obviously by the double century in Bangladesh. If you look at players who have played more than 10 tests, I think Craig Brathwaite's the closest. He averages 32. So in terms of consistent averages, it's not a strong point for West Indies. As I said at the top of the show, we rely on our bowlers to kind of skittle other teams out for low totals and build on that.
And just on Brathwaite, he's obviously not. I don't think he's been captain for very long. What are the initial thoughts on Brathwaite? I mean, I guess like Babar Azam, relatively new to kind of Test captaincy. What are the thoughts there amongst West Indies fans on his captaincy?
Yeah, I think obviously, funny enough, I think people outside the Caribbean liked Jason Holder as captain more so than people within the Caribbean, just because Jason Holder came across as a nice guy, a respectable guy, but he was very conservative in terms of he didn't like to bat first. He always chose to bowl first. His field placements were very conservative. He wasn't very aggressive. Whereas we've seen Brathwaite bring a more aggressive brand of cricket, be prepared to take more risks. If he wants something done, he'll even bring himself on to bowl part-time spin. So we've seen a more proactive captain. So it does look good. It is a good change. I think Holder, he was captain for 5 years. He got put in the role very young and he was sort of worn out. So a change was needed, and Brathwaite was the most obvious candidate in terms of experience. So it was the right move. Whether I think we'll see him continue for 5 years like Jason Holder, I don't think so. I think they'll groom someone else a bit younger coming forward. But for now, he's the right captain.
Okay. And I guess we'd say that about Babar as well. I mean, I think it's cautious optimism about the way Babar's captaining the team, and he does sometimes pull the odd kind of masterstroke out of the bag, especially in Test cricket. I think I've been more impressed with Barbara's Test captaincy than maybe some of the white ball stuff, where you've got to really think on your feet quite quickly. But anyway, look, we'll come back to Pakistan in just a little while. A question from first of all, also just to Adil, Walaikum Salam, and we're all good here. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining, Adil. You're often on the shows, and we really appreciate your input. Shoaib asked about the conditions in Sabina Park. I was having a look. I mean, there hasn't been a Test match there since 2019. I think there was one in 17, 18, and 19. I can't profess to have watched every second of them all, but the likes of Bumrah and Gedi, Nortje, I think as well, have previously done okay on those surfaces. I think Joaquin Cornwall got some wickets as well. So it seems like there's possibly something in it for everyone, Santoki, but you'll be able to tell us a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, historically, Sabina Park's always been like a pace bowler's dream, but in recent years, we've seen it become more conducive to spin. I would say it's probably 70-30 in favour of pace. So I think you'd be wise to have one spinner in your side, but generally I think the pacers with the Duke's ball are going to prosper, which I think suits both teams. So looking at that 11, then, based on what we've said, obviously, look, we're not out in Jamaica, so we can't be first-hand looking at conditions. So, you mentioned about the batsman there. So as it kind of pertains to the bowlers, you've got Holder there at 7 in the last game, Josh Da Silva, the keeper, at 8, and then 3 seamers. Do you see Chase being kind of, I guess, the main spinner in that team, or does Cornwall come in for one of the seamers or someone else? I think they'll go with Chase as the main spinner. We've used Cornwall very sparingly at home. We tend to use him more overseas, so I think they'll go with that. Unfortunately for you guys, the Pakistani hero Shannon Gabriel, he's not gonna play. He's injured at the moment, so we'll see. Probably Shamar Holder, another young fast bowler who's really good, come in, I think. So you'll have Roach, Seals and Shamar Holder, who I think could cause a lot of damage to that Pakistani lineup. Yeah, we've got the squad up there. And Hamza, I have to be honest, as a Pakistan fan, I'm quite glad not to see Shannon Gabriel, because obviously as much as we all love that kind of why did you do that moment, him and Roach, if I remember correctly, certainly a few years ago, did trouble us quite a lot in that Test series. So again, do you think that maybe, we were talking earlier about Pakistan having the edge, does the absence of Shannon Gabriel maybe play a role there?
Yeah, we generally don't do that well against the sort of hit the deck type of bowlers, especially in sort of seamer-friendly conditions. But they've still got enough. I liked what I saw of Seals against South Africa and the and the Sri Lankans. It's got really nice, smooth technique. It's got like a natural action that will just naturally give him a lot of outswing. I haven't seen him get the ball to swing in yet, but he showed quite good control. So I think he'll come in for. You'd imagine the sort of 3-man attack, pace attack will be something like Roach, Joseph, and Seals, with Holder being the sort of all-rounder and Chase being the spinner. But we've got a habit of what were we saying? We sort of give a lot of debutants, like a dream debut around the world, and sort of make their name and stuff like that. Like some random batsman comes in and makes a double 100 against us. Zach Crawley, for example. The guy's rubbish, but he made a double 100 against us, and he sort of milked that since then to remain in the England team now. So maybe one of the West Indian boys will do that. Just suddenly make a double 100 out of nowhere. Like Braithwaite will just smash us, or Chase will do. Yeah, Chase got 100 against us last time, sort of 2017-18. He looked really good, so maybe he'll sort of rekindle some of that form. It's funny you mention that, because me and Mashal are always mentioning West Indies. We give tailenders the best day of their lives with the back. Like we've seen Neil Wagner scored a half century against us to New Zealand. Rabada hit 40, his highest ever Test last year, hit like 60 or 30 balls against us. So we seem to be similar as well. We give the tailenders this time a good time with the bat, just because whether that's a mental thing, we just lose concentration to let it go with the tail end. So, like I mentioned off air, someone like a Hassan Ali should be rubbing his hands with glee, because he could be getting a maiden century in one of these tests.
So there's a few comments coming in for Santoki, which we'll get to in a second. Omar thinks that Brathwaite and Chase are the danger men, as they can bat long periods and score big. And I guess if the pitches do flatten out at some point, then yeah, West Indies do have, I guess, a couple of batsmen who are able to do that. Hulkistan says, Santoki, whose name should we remember? I think that might be a T20 World Cup final reference there.
I think in this Test one, you've mentioned Jayden Seals. I think Jayden Seals is going to be someone in years to come. We'll say this guy's a world-class bowler. He came in for the South Africa series having only played one first-class game in his whole career. But as we mentioned, he's got such a smooth action, really nice to watch, very pleasing on the eye. Obviously, as a 19-year-old, inexperienced, there's going to be some flaws. We saw a lot of fatigue, but I think in 5 years' time, we'll be saying Jayden Seals is one of the premier bowlers in Test cricket.
And another comment for yourself: do you see Chandapur whenever you see Fawad Alam bat? A throwback.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think there's been a lot of comparisons just in terms of the kind of pose, how they carry themselves with the bat, and also just their perseverance. Very, very similar. And I think West Indies need someone like a Fawad Alam in their middle order at the moment, someone who can sort of stabilise the innings. We've mentioned Mayers and Blackwood; they're sort of gung ho batters. We need someone who can kind of dig in and kind of soak up the balls.
So a question coming in about Rakeem Cornwall and fitness, and I'm going to come to you on that one in a second, Santoki, because I'm really interested to know what the thoughts are about that kind of stuff amongst West Indies fans. Hamza, I'm going to get your opinion. Obviously, it seems like Azam Khan is very polarising. We're not going to get too much into him because obviously he's a T20 player. But from a fitness point of view, if someone like Rakeem Cornwall was playing for Pakistan with the, let's say, the kind of the body shape that he has, what would your thoughts be, and where do you stand on the fitness versus talent debate?
If he was good, I'd put up with it. But it is quite rare. I think even if he was playing like 30, 40 years ago, you'd still be like, well, this is quite a sort of a big lad who's coming on. He actually moves okay around the field from what I remember seeing. I think I saw him against Sri Lanka. I think he played in that series, did he, Santoki?
Yeah.
Was it Sri Lanka? Yeah. So I saw him in that. His batting's quite useful as well. So I can understand from a West Indian perspective them picking him, because if he's at the end of the day your best second spinner, and in Test cricket you can hide in the field a little bit. You wouldn't give Cornwall a 2020 match or an ODI match. In Test cricket you can hide in the field a little bit if you offer enough with the bat and the ball, and he can bat quite well actually. I think he got 50 against Sri Lanka if I remember.
Yeah.
And his spinning is not too bad. There isn't a history of sort of like amazing spinners over the last 20, 30 years out of the West Indies, other than Sunil Narine, but not in Test cricket certainly. So yeah, I can understand why they picked him, but they're never going to pick him in an ODI 2020, and that tells you something about that you can't hide in the field in that format, but you can in Tests a little bit.
So as I said, Santoki, it's really polarizing in Pakistan, and we kind of, you're either pro Azam or kind of against him. What are the thoughts with Cornwall? Kind of the consensus amongst fans, as Umar and Shazeb have both asked at the same time, in fact.
Well, I think with Cornwall, there's no hiding the fact he's a big man. He's about 6'7". I think he's about 24, 25 stones. But in the slip cordons, he's amazingly agile. And he passes fitness tests that Shimron Hetmyer and Evan Lewis have failed in the past. Like, he passes all the fitness tests. So whilst he is big, and I can see why a lot of fans would say, how can he play Test cricket? He's sort of proven himself. There was a point a few years ago in a T20 match in the Caribbean CPL where he tried to get a substitute runner on because he'd run out of breath. But he's improved his fitness vastly. And it's funny you mentioned T20s, because in the CPL, he actually plays as an opener, pinch hitter, and he's quite successful. I would say he's more naturally suited to white ball game. But from looking at him now, I would say he's got the fitness for international level. It's just his size is slightly deceiving, but he's always going to be a big guy. You're never going to see him trim down to sort of like what you sort of quote unquote expect from an athlete. But if he passes the fitness test, I have no issue with it. And a lot of fans in the Caribbean agree with that sentiment.
That's interesting. Very interesting to know. So we are going to. I know there's obviously predominantly people that are watching, probably Pakistan fans. Obviously, we're going to talk about Pakistan in a moment. But again, just going on to the bowling of the West Indies. I know we've touched on a couple of these things already, but Shoaib wants to know about kind of average speeds of the West Indian bowlers. I guess, are we hitting the speeds of yesteryear? And who's the one to watch? Obviously, you mentioned Jaden Seals earlier.
Yeah. So in terms of pace, it would be Shamar Holder and Alzari Joseph. Unfortunately, Alzari Joseph hasn't really shown the discipline we'd come to expect of him. Having had that experience, he was left out of the South Africa series. He had a county stint, I think, at Worcestershire, which didn't go too well. So Shamar Holder's sort of our pace bowler at the moment. And Kemar Roach is someone who can hold the line and sort of be disciplined. But Shamar Holder's who you'd say he's not at the pace of the greats of yesteryears, but he's someone who could potentially reach that in years to come. He's very young as well. So
just elaborate on Alzari Joseph. Almost obviously asked a question about him. From memory, I guess he kind of burst onto the scene. He looked really, really promising whenever I first saw him. And since then, it hasn't quite worked out, has it?
Yeah, he sort of made his mark in white ball cricket. He had an IPL deal, then he got injuries, unfortunately. He's come back, as I said, in red ball cricket, he played against Sri Lanka. He was really ineffective with the ball, just lacked discipline, couldn't get wickets, was very wayward. He was ironically better with the bat. He's a very classy batsman as well, but you're not picking him as a batsman. So he was left out of the South Africa series. My logic would be if he was left out of that series and there hasn't been any red ball cricket where he's been able to practice in between then, he won't be playing against Pakistan. I think they'll go with Shamar Holder as the pace option.
Okay. And I guess generally and briefly, overall, in terms of where the West Indies Test team finds itself now, it sounds like the kind of thoughts are a much better bowling outfit than a batting outfit. And if there was one key to victory or two keys to victory that you would kind of be thinking about in the series coming up, Santoki, from a West Indian point of view, what do they need to do to have a chance in this series?
I mentioned we let the tail wag a lot. We need to be consistent. I think Kemar Roach is someone who comes out of the blocks. Against South Africa, he single-handedly almost pulled us back into the match by forcing a batting collapse. Kemar Roach is going to spearhead the bowling attack. As you mentioned, bowling is our strong suit. So he's going to be someone key. If he performs well, we have a chance in this match. And it's whether he can get backed up by Jaden Seals and Shamar Holder with the ball. I think that's key. If Pakistan bat first, for instance, and they put 350 plus, I don't think we're going to win it. We don't have the batting capability. So it all relies on our bowling attack managing to skiffle you guys out for a relatively low total and build on that. Okay.
So let's talk about Pakistan for a bit. Santoki, obviously want your opinions as well on kind of who you maybe are worried about or not, as the case may be. And again, want plenty of comments on the makeup of the Pakistan team. In the series to come. This is the 11 that started the last game. This was obviously against Zimbabwe. We come into this series in some decent form. Beat Zimbabwe 2-0, beat South Africa 2-0. Prior to that was a 2-0 defeat in New Zealand. Everyone seems to lose in New Zealand these days. I don't think we, maybe bar the top order in a few innings, I don't think we disgraced ourselves out there. I think we all know that's not going to be the 11 on Thursday, because obviously number 11 there, Dabish Khan, isn't, I don't think, even in the squad at the moment. But Hamza, what changes do you make to that 11, and also the comments? What 11s are you going to go for on Thursday?
Yeah, so they'll stick with Butt and Abid. Butt looks like an amazing slip catcher. It's interesting because Imran Butt is basically getting selected because he's an amazing slip catcher. Santoki, I don't know if you've seen some of his catching. No. He gobbles them up like it's nothing. It's like sort of Ricky Ponting on crack or something. He's amazing in the flips, but his batting looks quite scratchy. So he's sort of like a Pakistani Jonty Rhodes right now. We're not sure about his batting, but in the slips he looks amazing. Abid, I'm not a huge fan of his at all, but he made a double 100 against the mighty Zimbabwe, so that they can't drop him after that. As a good old reliable he's our little war horse, just ticks along. He'll be fine. Barber's form's been up and down in tests, so he's going to be hoping to make some runs. Fawad will be shooing at 5, so will Rizwan at 6. 7 will probably be Fahim, I'd imagine. I don't know what you think, Akbar, but considering West Indies...
I think so. I think that's what, Oman has mentioned as well, Fahim coming in at 7 there. I mentioned on Twitter the other day, slightly cheekily, I just wonder if you can play Hassan Ali at 7. If you have your 6 best batsmen, Hassan Ali at 7, it gives you the chance to then have 3 more seamers and a spinner, or 2 spinners, 2 seamers, and Hassan Ali as well as so just a 5-man attack essentially. But I agree with you. I think it's going to be Fahim at 7 there.
Yeah, so Fahim at 7, Hassan Ali will be 8. I'm not sure which spinner they're going to go with. Yasser hasn't played for a while because of injuries, but he's in the squad. They've got Noman as well. They've packed the test team with spinners. I really don't know why. It sort of stinks of they don't really know who to go with. So they've got what's the new leggy's name? I keep forgetting his name. That's it, Zahid.
Yeah, you got
Zahid Mahmood. That's it. Not a huge fan of his. Yasser's much better. So it'd be interesting whether they pick Yasser as a spinner or Sajid or Noman. I don't think they'll go with 2 spinners. I hope not, because judging by what I saw in the South Africa series, South Africa tour to the West Indies, the Sri Lanka tour to the West Indies, it was even the Sri Lankans who don't have great fast bowlers. It was their seamers like Lakmal and Chamara who were bowling quite well. And obviously the 3-man South Africa lineup did well. Nokia, and Ngidi and Rabada. So I'd imagine 7 will be Fahim to give you the extra seamer, 8 Hassan, 9 will be a spinner, and 10, 11. I'm hoping Shaheen and Dahani. I don't think have you seen much of Dahani, Santoki?
No, I haven't at all.
Yeah, he's basically the last first class season we had in Pakistan, the first class tournament's called Qaid Azam Trophy.
Yeah.
He was basically the best new bowler who came on the scene.
Okay.
And he got a PSL contract off the back of that with Multan, and he did really well in the PSL as well. Probably the best seamer in the PSL, the last PSL. So off the back of that, he's been sort of sniffing around the Pakistan team, the white ball team, without actually getting selected. And he's in the test squad as well. So I hope he gets selected, because I think that's a really good 3-man attack. Afridi and Dahani, Afridi left hand, Dahani a tall right hand. Dahani kind of reminds me a little bit of, his action is a little bit like Elizar Joseph, sort of like he's got a little jump and a skip and he sort of really runs up hard and fast. A little bit skiddy, but sort of a bit deceptive, quite tall. Hits about sort of 88 miles an hour consistently, 88, 90. So I'm hoping that's the 3-man attack, pace attack. Hassan, Afridi and Dahani opening with Hassan first change and one of the spinners, and Fahim 4 and 5.
What about Mohammad Abbas? Because I mean, I think back to the last tour to the West Indies, Yash has got a number of fifers. And Santoki, I'm sure you probably remember that series. Yasir Shah, obviously, we all remember the end, the final wicket, but he was a menace throughout for the West Indians. Yeah. And that was Abbas's first Test tour, I think, and he was pretty good as well, along with Hassan Ali. I'd probably have Mohammad Abbas in there ahead of Dahani. But Santoki, as you look, and it'd be interesting to know what the comments make of that, guys who are watching, Abbas or Dahani, if it was to be between those two. But Santoki, as you look at that kind of Pakistan squad and the Pakistan team, where do you know, what keeps you up at night? What do you worry about, the batsmen, the bowlers, or nothing?
As a West Indian, I tend not to worry about too much. But if we're looking at just on your point on Mohammad Abbas, I know Pakistan played a warm-up game in Guyana, intra-squad, and Abbas took 3 wickets in a rain-affected match. So it could be someone who they go with if he's doing well in the conditions. But I think what we mentioned at the beginning, it's a very settled team. And you look at that top 6 and sort of anyone is capable of putting up a big score. I'm a big fan of Mohammad Rizwan and obviously Babar Azam. But I must say, the last time I saw Babar, I think he got out for a first ball duck against Zimbabwe. So as you mentioned, his form been a bit inconsistent, but I think Butt and Abid are very consistent at the top. And my personal favourite batter, we mentioned earlier, similar to Chandapur, Fawad Alam, I think just because of the narrative, the story around him, and just the way he plays. So me personally, I'm more worried about the batting lineup, because I just think anyone in that top 6 is capable of putting up a very big score against West Indian bowlers. But then you mentioned as well, the bowling lineup as well. Shaheen is excellent. I'm really big fan of him, and it'd be good to see Yasir Shah back in. Personally, I'm a big fan of him. I like him, and he's had history in the Caribbean, so it'd be good to face him again in these conditions. So yeah, no, I think for me the batting lineup is definitely more of a threat of than the bowling. But overall, both of them are going to cause West Indies trouble. Yeah,
it's interesting you mentioned about we're talking about Babar Azam and generally that batting lineup. If we look at the Zimbabwe and South Africa series against Zimbabwe, I think. Imran Butt nearly got 100. I think he got a 90 odd. Azad got 100 against them. Abid got a double 100 against Zimbabwe. Fahim was scoring runs against South Africa. And actually, in his past 6 innings, I know it's a very, very small sample size. It's only 6 innings, but Babar's actually only gone past 30 once in those 6 innings, which is so unlike him because you tend to look up at the scorecard and he's already there on kind of 40 not out kind of thing. And so he's gone through a bit of a rough patch. In Test cricket, I mean, certainly Maharaj. I saw Maharaj give him a bit of trouble. We saw that in the South Africa series, and Santoki. I think Keshav Maharaj. Did he not get a 5 for South Africa as well? I just wonder if left arm spin might be a way of targeting Babar potentially.
Yeah. Maharaj got a hat trick against us. But I must say that was even he was shocked he managed to get it out of the conditions. It was more just careless shots from the West Indian batsmen. So I think. Spin, I don't know if it's going to be conducive to spin. I don't know if left arm spin is going to be that deadly on these pitches. But with West Indian batsmen being quite reckless, especially as they go lower down the order, I think you will see spin causing damage, but not because of the conditions, more so just the style of West Indian batting.
Yeah. Omar mentions about we were just talking about Abbas and Dahani. He goes for Abbas just because of obviously the World Test Championship points. We're going to come on to the World Test Championship actually in a second. I think there's an interesting kind of little debate to be had there. And obviously, yes, the fact that it's only a 2-test series, I think he'd probably rather just give the nod to Abbas. Halkistan agrees. Dahani may be in a home test conditions he's potentially used to. So I guess it depends which way the kind of the selectors go with that one. Just on the Wild Test Championship, we'll come back to maybe the Pakistan team in just a moment. This is what each team has got in the Wild Test Championship. This is obviously West Indies at the top there. They've got 3 home series against ourselves, Pakistan, England and Bangladesh, and they go to South Africa, Sri Lanka and Australia. And Pakistan have got Australia, New Zealand and England at home, and they travel to West Indies, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. Hamza, from a Pakistan point of view, you couldn't pick 3 better teams to play at home. I mean, I think New Zealand, England and Australia haven't toured Pakistan for maybe 20 years, each of them. And you probably couldn't pick 3 more kind of Pakistani-like conditions to play away series in terms of West Indies, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. We've got to be looking at finishing near the top of this World Test Championship, haven't we?
Yeah, you'd imagine so, but it's probably not how it's going to pan out. Yeah, but New Zealand actually, they put up a really good fight against us in the UAE a few years back when, this is before their rise in Test cricket, and so I wouldn't expect just New Zealand to roll over. England, yeah, they're usually sort of a bit quite poor in Asian conditions. Australia are just getting a hammering right now in Bangladesh. I know that's just 2020s, but it's still, what did they get out for? 62 recently, I think Bangladesh got them one out for. Yeah. So yeah, I'd fancy us to beat England and Australia. I think New Zealand would put up a good fight. And the away ones, as you say, West Indies, Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. Beaten Bangladesh recently, beaten Sri Lanka recently as well. And we've got West Indies right here. So yeah, I mean, I'm quietly confident, but you know what? We need Babar to start making some runs. He's the X factor batsman. You sort of got Joe Root with England, Steve Smith with the Aussies, Williamson with New Zealand, Babar with Pakistan. If he starts making runs, then anything's possible with this Test team, I think, because I think we've got enough good seamers, we've got some good spin options. Rizwan's I've said it for about a year now. He's the best keeper batsman in the world, Rizwan. We still got to find a proper opening combination, I think. I'm not convinced by Abid, but I think the rest of the team's pretty solid. So yeah, I fancy us.
Halkistan wants you to believe. He wants a bit more. He wants a bit more optimism, yeah. I think. I guess I just look at it and I look at those 6 series that we've got, and to me, I feel like West Indies away potentially is the hardest we've got of those 6. Sorry, Hamza's obviously on duties as well, much like Michelle, who unfortunately might not be able to join us this evening. So, I mean, just speaking as a Pakistan fan, I look at those. Hamza's back. I look at those 6.
Yeah, sorry, I just have to get rid of my daughter.
Yeah, sorry. And I see West Indies away as potentially the most difficult tour. And if, a bit of a football cliche, if we can kind of escape from the Caribbean with a point or something, get a draw, that or a share of the points, obviously in this format, that might set us in good stead for the rest of the championship. I think it's probably a bit more difficult for West Indies. From memory, and then you can correct me if I'm wrong, Santeki, I don't remember too many series wins in South Africa or Australia away. Although somehow you always seem to be England at home, no matter what shape either team comes into the series in.
I was going to say, of that list, I'm looking at 5 losses, and probably England's our best. As you said, I think it's historically just the obviously history between West Indies and England. We always seem to kind of get a boost out of playing them, and England, as we've seen, their Test side isn't great at the moment. They always tend to struggle us. So ironically, I'm confident about winning against England. Bangladesh as well, we should be confident about. But I would say probably West Indies and Bangladesh are equal at the moment in terms of quality. So you don't know how that's going to go. Pakistan, as I said, is going to be very tough for us to get a win in this series. And away, as you mentioned, South Africa and Australia, I can't see us getting anything from those. Sri Lanka as well, I think they'll outspin us. So I'd say England and Bangladesh are potential routes. But I don't think you'll be seeing us at the World Test Championship final, unfortunately, as much as I'm an optimist.
I mean, I have to be honest, our last set of fixtures weren't particularly easy. I mean, we went to New Zealand, we went to England as part of the World Test Championship, places where we haven't won for a while. Amongst West Indian fans and kind of the paying public, how important is the WTC? How seriously are people taking it? Do people know about it? I mean, a lot of Pakistan fans don't, to be honest.
Nah, I'd say with West Indies fans, you've obviously got the older generation who still care about the Test cricket, but for the most part, most people, especially this year, it's all locked in for the T20 World Cup. So everything's about when we're on social media and discussing it, all talk is about selections for the white ball games. And unfortunately, it seems like partly down to the consistent decline of the side, there's not that much interest in Test cricket. And I think with the World Test Championship, I don't know if it's the same with Pakistan, but just because it hasn't been publicized or explained very well, there's a lot of confusion about it and there's no legacy at the moment to it. So I don't think most West Indian fans wouldn't even probably know that the series against Pakistan had World Test Championship points on the line. So unfortunately, I don't think it's a priority. I think T20 cricket at the moment, because of the World Cup and just because we're good at it, is always on the forefront of fans' mind. But interesting as well, I think Jared Kimber, the journalist, looked at all the scenarios for the different teams in the World Test Championships, and he'd worked out that Pakistan were his favourites to get to the final based on how other teams were going to do. So I think you guys could put together a good run based on the sides you're facing.
He's a smart lad. He's Jared. Well, if he says it, it must be true. So look, we're gonna do predictions in a second. So those who are watching, feel free to just pop in the comments what you think the prediction is going to be. It's only a 2-test series, so not many possibilities, unfortunately. Hamza, from a Pakistan point of view, then we spoke to Santoki about the keys to win. Where are we winning this series? Either in terms of nullifying West Indian threat or kind of accentuating our own. What are the keys for Pakistan to win another series in the Caribbean?
Yeah, so I can imagine Rizwan's red hot right now. So you'd think he's going to make runs. I think Fawad, he's in good form as well. He'll make runs, you'd hope. Babar's been up and down, but you'd want him to make some sort of recovery. So I think we've backed deep enough. If we play Fahim and Fahim's white ball bat form's rubbish, but his test form with the bat is actually pretty good because he can sort of play himself in, take his time. That's generally how he likes to bat. He's not sort of like a batsman who just come in and bash it. He sort of takes his time, plays his way in. So seeing us batting right down to 8 and sort of 9, 10, 11 they're not as useless as they used to be, our 9, 10s and 11s. So I think batting wise we should be okay. I can imagine us being 20 for 2. And we were sort of 20 for 2 quite often against South Africa, actually. But the difference in the South Africa series, where we won it 2-0, and it was actually the South Africa series was a really great series to watch because it was really close. Both teams were sort of batting first, getting sort of 220s, 290 kind of scores, and then second time round, sort of similar scores again, sort of like 280, 290s, and both tests sort of went right down to the wire. And the difference was Rizwan, basically. He made some really important runs down the order, sort of batting with the tail. So I'm not saying, I don't think the West Indian lineup's as good as the South Africa one. But I think if we get into trouble early, we're kind of used to guys getting us out of it, like Fawad and Rizwan and even Hassan chipping in. So my instinct says 2-0. I don't. With Pakistan, I never sort of go in thinking that's it. We're gonna, whitewash or something. But if there's enough time out there, I can imagine us sort of squeezing home with a 2-0 because the batting they bat deep enough, and I think the seamers are good enough to extract the 20 wickets.
So there's your optimism is shared by a few of our comments who, unsurprisingly for a Pakistan cricket the YouTube channel, are ultimately overwhelmingly Pakistan. So we've got Umar saying 1-0 Pakistan. We've got Pakistan saying 2-0 to Pakistan. Shoaib thinks 1-0 win in my eyes, inshallah. Imi thinks 2-0 to Pakistan. No one's given West Indies a test yet. Umar thinks 1-0 to Pakistan, or a bit of rain around. That might obviously affect things too. So Santoki, what does your heart say? What does your head say?
My head says Pakistan 2-0, but my heart, as a reckless West Indian, I'm saying 2-0 West Indies. I think we can pull off a miracle, the miracle in Jamaica.
Yeah.
So we've got 2-0 Pakistan, 2-0 West Indies. I'm not going to sit on the fence on purpose, but I mentioned it earlier. I feel like neither team would be that disappointed with a draw. If we shared the points in this series and came away with a 1-1, it probably keeps Misbah a job. It probably keeps everything nice and stable. West Indies kind of get a win. They haven't had one of those at home for a little while. So I guess optimism would say maybe 1-0 Pakistan. Maybe Head says a 1-1 draw if the weather doesn't play spoil sport.
Thing is, in Pakistan, people still think of West Indies as the 80s and 90s West Indies. So they're like, oh, you came away with a drawn series against West Indies. That's all right then.
Don't worry, it's not just Pakistan. I think every country in the world still thinks we're in our glory days from 30 years ago.
Question from Hulkistan. I think, unfortunately, the answer to this question might be no, Santoki, but you can let us know. We're going to see crowds at the games.
No, definitely not. Michelle, my co-host, is Jamaican. He was telling me earlier, actually, they've got a curfew at the moment in Jamaica. So after 6 p.m, you can't leave the house, and no fans are allowed at any sporting events. So unfortunately, there won't be any fans. But from an audience perspective, I guess it won't make much of a difference. I mean, test matches in West Indies are very sparsely attended. So you're not going to really notice, like, there's not going to be atmosphere missing, for instance.
So if we widen the discussion a little bit, how does that change in West Indies? How do you get crowds back in? Or is that just, we've been talking about this for years and years, it feels like. Is that just a bygone era now? Yeah,
I think it's a bygone era. And I think in England, Australia, more developed countries, people can afford to take time off work to attend test matches. I think in the Caribbean, realistically, people aren't going to miss work to watch cricket. We've seen there's definitely an interest in cricket. If you look at the CPL, it's rammed, full, sold out. Those are evening games. I think test cricket, it's just the economic factors and coincided with the fact that West Indies aren't as good as they were 20, 30 years ago, means there's not really a motivation for fans to go back. So I think this is probably a more permanent change. I don't think we'll ever see fans, the new generations, flocking to see test cricket. And I think obviously all of us based in England are quite lucky that test cricket matches in England are always sold out and you get a great atmosphere. But I think a lot of countries in world cricket, it's just not the case realistically.
Yeah, and there's probably a wider political point as well, isn't there, in terms of, you know, maybe if there were more test matches in a series, if boards could afford to play more test matches in a series, because this was supposed to be a 3-test series, I think, Hamza, wasn't it? And then it was reduced to 2, am I right?
Yeah, it was originally 3 tests, and then took it down to 2, unfortunately.
Which
is unfortunate. You know, these are two sort of powerhouses in a way of test cricket. You know, we've given so much to test cricket, and we're just playing 2 tests against each other, unfortunately.
So we're going to come back to, I was going to dig out a stat of mine, which is that West Indies haven't won a home test series against Pakistan since 2000, which is, I think, 21 years ago now. In fact, maybe we'll talk about that game as well, because that series in itself was pretty controversial. One of the closest finishes to a test series I can remember. So again, those in the comments, any memories from Pakistan West Indies games? It doesn't have to be test matches, ODIs, T20s, hundreds, whatever format you like. If you've got any memories of Pakistan West Indies games that you want to kind of talk about or just bring up in the last 10 minutes or so that we have, that would be good. Obviously, I'll be asking you guys as well. Quick question from Umar for you, Santoki. Just a very general kind of answer, kind of COVID situation in the West Indies. You mentioned curfew in Jamaica.
Yeah, it's not great at the moment. Obviously, vaccine supplies haven't been getting out there. So a lot of countries, Trinidad have shut the borders, have a curfew. Guyana cases are rising. So unfortunately, again, due to economics and the fact that they haven't been able to buy the supplies of vaccines, we are seeing cases going up and more restrictions going ahead. So it's not looking great in at the moment. But obviously, hopefully, as they get more supplies, we'll see an improvement in the coming months.
I think we've already got our, absolutely. First of all, absolutely echo that, of course. We've got our first answer to memories of Pakistan West Indies games. Why did he do that? So I think that's the 4th mention in the last 45 minutes of that particular bit of commentary. That obviously was a 2017 win. Hamza, memories from any Pakistan West Indies game you can think about that you remember?
Easy, mate. Easy. I always remember one. I don't know if you boys remember the '92 tour. That was an amazing tour. West Indies were still at their peak. Pakistan had Wasim and Waka roaring in. And I don't know if you remember the one-day series. The one-day series, they were still playing in whites then. And then it was 2-2. And I don't know where the 3rd test was. I don't know if it was Sabina Park or something. I don't know if you guys remember.
Pitch invasion?
No. West Indies needed 2 to win. And I can't remember who it was. They hit it straight to the fielder. And the fielder threw it in, I think it was Mushtaq, and he threw it into Ramiz Raja. And it was such an easy run out. But Ramiz Raja dropped the ball like 3 times. He dropped the ball, went to pick it up, fumbled it again, went to pick it up again, fumbled it, and he didn't take the stumps off, and the West Indies got the 2nd run and won the series 3-2. So that was a crazy series, the 1992 one.
I think again, the few comments coming in about memories. Santoki, we'll come to yours in a second. I suspect it's probably going to be a West Indies win rather than a Pakistan one. So yeah, Amy talks about Lara being well by. That was a Yorker, I think, didn't it? They took out his leg stump. Am I right? I think there's a pretty famous YouTube clip, I think, of that one.
Yeah.
Uma talks about the Champions Trophy. No, these aren't good memories. So Champions Trophy, I think, was certainly 2013. I think at the Oval.
Yeah, I was at that match. That was actually a hilarious match. I think Misbah was on like 96, and he was looking for his debut century, and he was relying on Mohamed Irfan to kind of block out the over, and he couldn't do it. And it was a tight match, and West Indies won it. And that was I remember that match because there was probably, including myself, probably about 3 West Indies fans in the whole of the Oval.
Yeah, no, funnily enough, I also happened to be there, and it was very good atmosphere, as you kind of always expect with kind of Pakistan fans there. But I remember Irfan bowling like the wind that day. It was a really good game, and West Indies just snuck home. So maybe almost actually talking about I wonder if you're talking about the 2004 Champions Trophy game. That was the game
2004.
that
Shoaib knocked out Brian Lara, didn't he?
Yeah, Shoaib bounced to Brian Lara.
Yeah.
As well. So yeah, we won't talk about World Cup 2019 because that was the game that essentially knocked us out, I think, with run rate being what it was. Last over 6 from Zulfikar on that was a T20 game in the Caribbean, I think, possibly.
Yeah, that was about 2013 or 14, I think. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Imi remembers Lara again. There's I think Robbie Linder or Robe Linder on YouTube has got one of these clips of Lara hitting Canaria for 6-6-4-6, something like that in Pakistan. Or just get through.
Canaria gave him some mouth.
Yeah, I think Canaria had been mouthing off, hadn't he? 92 World Cup. Holkistan talks about the. We should have done a whole show on memories. There's loads of them coming through. 92 World Cup. I think West Indies. Yeah, they won that. Yeah, by 10 wickets. Let's have a look. What else have we got? Haynes and Richie Richardson against Wasim and Magard from days gone by.
Yeah, 92 series. That was great.
No, the year they won it against England was at 07. So, that was 04, I think. Where you won the Champions Trophy in 04, didn't you?
04, yeah.
Samtoki, go on, over to you then. Memories of playing Pakistan, good memories or bad?
Well, unfortunately, because of my age, I missed all of the glory years. So all of the stories about Viv and onwards, unfortunately, I didn't get to see them. You mentioned the 2000 series. That was one of the first series I remember watching as a kid. I think we won the final test by 1 wicket. I remember you absolutely stole that final test. I think, but Pakistan were just as much to blame. We missed some run-outs that day as well, to be fair. Yeah. And I think it's telling that most people's memories of good contests are from like 30 years ago, because as you mentioned, since we haven't won any tests in Pakistan, I think we toured 2003, 2007, we haven't won. And at home, we've drawn a lot of series and we lost the most recent one. So for me, I think a more recent memory of a great test match was 2016 UAE, when we played you guys. We were already 2-0 down. It came into the 3rd test. It was a young squad. We lost Chanderpaul, Ramdin, Chris Gale. They'd all left test arenas. And Craig Brathwaite, I think, carried the bat, hit a 1-4-2. And it was just at the time, we thought it was the new era coming in. These youngsters, Shane Dowich, Roston Chase, Craig Brathwaite. And to get a win in the UAE, which was historically always tough for away sides to do that against Pakistan, for me, that was a personal highlight and one of the few times in the last 25 years we've actually won a test against you guys.
I'm trying to think, was that the pink ball test or was that the Azhar 300? Umar mentions the Azhar 300. One of them was a pink ball test. It was the pink
ball was the 3rd one that Brathwaite carried the bat. I think it was the 2nd test Azhar hit 300. Right.
And also Umar encapsulates Pakistan cricket, 570 for 3 declared and then bowled out for 1-2-3. Welcome to Pakistan cricket, Umar. So look, loads of good memories there. We've not got that long left. And Santoki, we really want to know, I guess, a little bit more about the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. If you've got a few minutes to spare us, just tell us kind of the work that you guys are doing and how you've kind of got this project off the ground, because the bits I've heard are really, really good.
Yeah, so it basically started, I'm from a Guyanese background. My co-host, Michelle's from a Jamaican background. We're both British. We're both British. But we realised we talked a lot about West Indies cricket and there wasn't really an outlet for like opinions and views on West Indian cricket. You'd hear bits and pieces, but a lot of it was coming from abroad. It was like a mystery trying to find out about players and news. So we thought, let's put our minds together and just sort of come up with a podcast where initially it was just meant to be me and him talking about news in the West Indies. Obviously, lockdown happened. We found players were at home just as bored as us and happy to come on. And it's sort of escalated from there. We've had some great players on, Darren Bravo, Phil Simmons has jumped on. Shimron Hetmeyer was a recent guest, and we partnered up with the Caribbean Premier League. So if you're interested in Caribbean cricket, just follow us on Twitter at Carib Cricket, and there's links to all the podcasts there. And we're happy to engage with people on social media and also just check out our pods, just because we feel like we can just provide a lot of people fixate on the glory years of West Indies cricket, and they tend to ignore what's happening currently. So we like to think we're an outlet to look at people who want to know about what's happening in West Indies cricket at the moment, because as we said off air, for most people, West Indies is their second team. So a lot of people like to know about West Indies, even if they don't have a link to the Caribbean. So we just like to think we provide that outlet, and we're glad that people enjoy our content, which is just us being us. So yeah, just anyone on here, just check us out.
No, absolutely will do. And those of us who've checked you out so far, I think, have been really, really impressed by the content that you guys are producing. The names that you're able to speak to, the access that you've got is really, really impressive. And you mentioned about being second teams. I mean, I think a lot of our, whether it's uncles, dads, or whatever, have all got a soft spot for the West Indies, and that's kind of filtered down as well. And we don't want to go down kind of lazy stereotypes, all that kind of stuff. But mercurial is a phrase that you could talk about Pakistan cricket and West Indies cricket kind of over the past 20 years, kind of that brothers in, like, you just don't know what the heck's going to happen next kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I think on our social media, we definitely have affinity with Pakistan fans, just because I think we're united by the emotional turmoil that our teams cause us over the years.
Absolutely. Hamza, I guess you'd echo that as well?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Both very unpredictable teams. So that's why I was so reticent to say 2-0.
So unless there's any more comments coming through, I think we might probably just call it a day there, to be honest. It's been really interesting. An hour has flown by. Hamza, thanks for your thoughts on the series. Obviously, look, we're all looking forward to it. It gets going on Thursday, 4 o'clock. Another plus, by the way, of watching the West Indies is how much it kind of can coincide with the working day here. You get home 4, 5, 6 o'clock or whatever, and watch cricket till bed. I mean, what more can you ask for? So, Santoki, thanks so much for coming on. Hopefully, if we do another one of these shows at some point, good to have yourself and Michelle on. And hopefully, we'll be looking back on a Pakistan/West Indies win. I'll let you pick whichever one you want there. And yeah, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, guys. Absolute pleasure to come on. And as you said, we'll touch base after West Indies secure the 2-0 win in a few weeks' time.
All right, we'll see. Cheers, guys. Thanks, everyone, for watching. We always finish with the Pakistan Zindabad. We'll add in a rally around the West Indies. And hopefully we'll speak to you guys soon. Take care, and thanks a lot.
See ya.